Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Where are we? Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California, where the Lions season ended tonight, 34-31 in the NFC title game. Sort of not sort of at all. It's a crushing loss. They were up by 17 in the first half. Couldn't make the play when they needed in the second half. A loss so painful that we needed another Free Press reporter. Right.
Well, she's our therapist.
Yeah, she's a counselor, therapist, and hopefully your therapist. She spent most of the game out among the fans. There were Lions fans all over the place. And we wanted to get Dana Afana's thoughts, the City Hall reporter of the Free Press, who's been out here how long? A couple of days. I want to say she was at both playoff games back in Fort Field, so she got in a feel for this, right, Carlos? But before we get to Donna, I want to ask Carlos his quick thoughts on what happened tonight.
Yeah, it was probably I wrote that it was the worst meltdown in Lions history when you're up 24-7 at halftime.
Of course you did.
Everything is going their way. And I think that Dana Afana here is going to back me up in some of the reactions she got, basically being, I think, shooed away from some fans. It was such an emotional, devastating loss, worse than the Justin Tucker kick, worse than the 10-second runoff against Atlanta, worse than the, why, Shawn? Because it was so much promise. Everybody, I guarantee you, I kind of made a joke that if this keeps up, whatever, on halftime, the Delta app's going to crash because everybody's going to be making their flights to Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. So there was so much hope, they couldn't do anything wrong in the first half, and then they couldn't do anything right in the second half. And I think that's always the worst way to lose, right? Is when you have like victory snatched away from you and you felt it was right there. So I want Dana's thoughts on what did the fans say?
And also take us from the first half, because you were out in the first half and then out after the game. Sort of take us through that swing.
Oh, yeah. I've been talking to people since breakfast at the hotel all the way through the end of the game. And people were excited. Everyone believed that we were going to win all weekend. They believed this since the Rams playoff. And everybody out there they said this is so magical. It's so monumental for Detroit. And regardless of what happens, they still believe in the Lions. But when it came to the end of the game, someone, I was talking to a gentleman who was upset. He was about to talk to me and his wife shooed me away. She actually looked at me and said, "You can go away now." So decided to leave, give her space. But, some other folks clearly disappointed. They said, this isn't the end. We still have hope. There is a future. But
you spent time talking to people that went to fairly great efforts, right? To find their way out here, and all sorts of Detroit fans coming from all over the world. Now, most of them, I'm sure, were from Michigan, but that's kind of an amazing story and an amazing buildup. And Carlos, you're talking about this is the worst loss. It's the worst loss because of what was at stake.
Absolutely.
That's the thing, right? And when so much is at stake, and I'm sure you could feel that, and you could probably feel the anxiety in the second half in particular.
Oh, yeah. there are fans who spent about $10,000 just to be here. They spent, I'd say it's a total of like tickets, hotels, and, tickets from previous games as well. Other people spent not $10,000, but still a sizable amount of money to be here. They took time off work. They have to go back to work tomorrow. And yeah, it really is kind of a meltdown for fans. They were excited. They were doing really well, and they thought this was their year. And in true Lions fashion, it just didn't happen.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're not a sports writer, so you can be a little bit more subjective here.
Sure.
You grew up in the Metro Detroit area. Are you a fan of the Lions? Were you a fan of the Lions before, or were you sort of indifferent?
I was indifferent, actually. I didn't really start watching football until a couple years ago. I'm more of a soccer fan myself. So the other football, the one that matters. But, I got into it, and I think it's the fan culture that really stood out to me so much. There's a reason why I'm here. There's a reason why the Free Press sent us here, because Lions fans are just different from every other fan out here in the country. And I think, there's something so special about them. They have this connectedness. They have this really strong belief in their team. And no matter what happens, even after decades of losses, they're still here. They're spending money. They're out here because, they're honoring their father who might have died and got them into the team, or they're here to make memories for their kids. It's kind of like a family dynamic.
And that's really what was going on out here, right, Carlos? The passion, the generations, the way things have been passed down. And you're absolutely right. There's no other, maybe there are other fan fan bases that are like it, but in terms of the Lions fan base, the Lions team in the city, the way these folks are, it's tied into how Detroit sees itself. It is right now, and how Detroiters feel the rest of the country thinks of them. And it's been tied into this football team that's had so much hard luck and tough luck and bad losses, and general managers didn't know all this sort of thing, and so to have the year they had, I think there was a lot of pride, not just in the team, but in how it reflected back on our home.
100%. And I think, the word grit is kind of being overused right now, but grit has existed in Detroit for so long, from not just a Lions standpoint, but like the business standpoint, Detroit's growth in general. I mean, I've covered the city's growth over the years, and that is what essentially describes anybody from Detroit, whether you're a sports fan, whether you're investing in the city, whatever it may be.
Whether you're a soccer fan.
We do have a soccer team too, but it's definitely, it's special. It's special for the fans. And I think this unfortunately wasn't their moment, but a lot of them did say there's always next year. I talked to a 17-year-old boy who was crying leaving the stadium, and he probably had the most positive response, saying, it stings, but there's always tomorrow, and they got this far and they're doing really well now. So you have to remember that about the Lions.
Well, that's a nice perspective for a 17-year-old. I don't know if I had that perspective. You may have. You've always been ahead of your years. Well, thanks for joining us, Dan. It's nice to have you offer some perspective on just what it was like here, and the fact that the Free Press sent you and a colleague out to sort of document all this. I don't know. It was a love fest, wasn't it? It was a love affair, manifest destiny, whatever you want to call it, heading out west. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk a little bit more about the game, and Carlson can tell us how they're never going to get back here again. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh, look, Carlson's going to be the optimist. I want to hear all about it. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. I can't believe you know what? We're still going to do our podcast. We're just not going to have any of these after post-game podcasts anymore. We're not going to have any. We'll have some Lions-centric podcasts, the draft and trades, and who's going to replace
Red Wings now.
Your beloved Ben Johnson. Yeah. By the way, and I have a family member. Okay, fine. It's my youngest son. There's a theory that the reason the Lions lost tonight, Carlos, let's hear what you think of this, is that the last time the Lions lost was in Dallas. The Pistons won. They broke their streak, whatever. That was the first time they won in 30 whatever games, 20 whatever games. I can't remember. And the Pistons actually won earlier today. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they are related?
No.
That they won on the same day that the game, that it's some kind of mystical conspiracy?
No, but let's get to football, Shawn. Let's not waste time. The people want to hear. This is the bat phone over here where I try to call Dan Campbell and tell him not to go to kick the field goal on fourth down. He wouldn't listen to me. So let's talk about that. What happened? How did this go from world beaters to just abject failure? Like it was like an avalanche coming down in the second half. What happened?
It was a series of mistakes, and I wrote this. None of them the game killer on their own, but there were just too many of them in a row, one after the other. We can start with the field goals. To me, that's a cheap, easy thing to do. I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying the math said he should have gone for it, but forget the math. Their kicker's not that good. It's an outdoor, it's on turf, it's 48 yards. Why is there an assumption that he's going to make it?
Right. When you don't kick it, there's always an assumption that they would have made it.
Look.
And if they miss it, why did you go for it? You've been aggressive all year. Now he was out of character. You can't win. No,
you can't. If that was a 34-yard field goal, absolutely he would have kicked it. He would have kicked it because the number said he would have kicked, right? It was 4th and 2. It wasn't a perfect pass to Josh Reynolds from Jared Goff, but it was catchable, and Reynolds didn't do it. Here's the thing: if he catches that, they could who knows? You never know, but we're assuming now. But they could have easily scored a touchdown there, answered San Francisco's field goal, and they're right back up 17. That might have been the game. The San Francisco might not, unless Detroit collapsed with turnovers. I know they had a fumble later, but it's just so they had to drop past Carlos, and then San Francisco scores, and they come right back. Jahmyr Gibbs fumbles, and they score again. All of a sudden, it's a tie game, and then they move again, or they don't move it, they punt it. What happened with Jack Fox? You saw what happened to Jack Fox. He kicked, a 100-yard field goal. Punt. I'm exaggerating. It was just a glorious spiral into the dark San Francisco night, and Santa Clara night, and it hit like the 2 or 3 yard line, or maybe 5 yard line, and bounced a tiny bit forward, but mostly straight up. They can pin him there. Now maybe San Francisco again, maybe they get out anyway. Yeah. But so that's another mistake though, right? And then Josh Reynolds drops another ball. Jared Goff has Sam Laporta for at least a 20-yard gain, and the ball he throws a week ago against Tampa, where he hits Amon-Ra St. Brown in the end zone over his shoulder, gorgeous ball. He can't quite make to Laporta, right? And he had a couple of misses, and he's had games where he's had a couple of misses, but not always, but most of the times he comes back and makes the throw he needs to make, and he couldn't quite do that either. So it was a collective thing. They weren't as effective running the ball. Yeah, it was everything. They couldn't. Melifon had a sack opportunity, and he whiffed on it. Was that a third down? I can't remember if it was a third down. It was enough to would have changed the series. I think the 49ers scored on that. But so to me, that's what happened. It was just one after another after another.
Yeah, it was. And it was both sides of the ball, right, defensively. And, give the 49ers credit. Okay, they're the top seed in the NFC for a reason. And they made adjustments. And suddenly they were running the ball better. They were, making passes. George Kittle had 1 target in the first half and no catches. And he made a big, I think it was a third down catch. So that's what good teams do, is they make adjustments. And the Lions just had some things kind of go against them, and they just, defensively, the 49ers also made some adjustments well. They brought more pressure on Jared Goff. I don't think they blitzed quite as much, but they were just, I guess, figuring out maybe how to get to him, how to bend around the corners more. At one point, I think it was, I don't know if it was the first half, but Nick Bosa just, trucks Dan Skipper, just runs over him like he's a little kid and sacks Goff. And, they were learning what they needed to do, so they were becoming more effective. And you can't, they always say, well, hey, that team gets paid too. They're doing their job, and they're a really good team, and they're playing at home. So, I think the first half of it was a little bit, things worked out for the Lions in so many ways. Jake Moody misses a field goal, little things like that. So it wasn't, the Lions were playing great, but the 49ers maybe just had a slower start, whatever. They struggled last week against the Packers. They almost lost to them. So maybe this isn't a, world-class 49ers team, but they're certainly good enough to make adjustments and obviously come back, and, it's a 3-point game.
It was, and Brock Purdy throws the pick. He just kind of just threw a sack of potatoes is flying through the air, and that Malcolm Rodriguez caught, and it was
tipped though.
It was, but then so you get a little bit. You're right, it was tipped. So you get a little bit of a break. And what did Purdy do in the second half? Not only did he pick up some first downs on his feet, and the Lions lost contain. It was a couple times up the middle. It wasn't really out of maybe one time I was on the edge, but he also made some really nice throws on the run. You were talking about the plastic Kittle. If I'm not mistaken, he was out of the pocket when he made that pass. Mm-hmm. And there were a few others where Purdy's been maybe not quite an MVP candidate. He's been great for most of this year, right? He's really good.
I think one thing with Purdy that was different was I don't think he, what they're kind of learning about these not quite RPO, but mobile quarterbacks is don't run unless you have to. And I think in the first half, they really wanted to run the ball, establish the run with Christian McCaffrey, get it going. They have a really good fullback. So they were trying to establish that, and they really couldn't. They were struggling to do that. And I think in the second half, one of the things they said, okay, look, we're down 17. We got to just do whatever we can. And that means if you see some daylight in the pocket, run. And I think, don't forget, a few years ago, I think it was against the Rams one year when he got a concussion, I think it was, and he was knocked out. So, you want to protect your quarterback, but when you're down by this much and it's win or go home, and he started scrambling a lot more and started using his legs a lot more, and we didn't see that in the first half. So that changed a little bit of the game plan, not only for the 49ers, but also for the Lions defense. And as we know, they've struggled with more mobile quarterbacks, guys like Lamar and guys like Jalen Hurts. So that's a weakness. And I think the 49ers just didn't want to have to do that. And they did in the second half, and it paid off huge for them, because not only does he make plays with his arms, but he gets out of the pocket. He's, making plays down the field. that way. So it did change the game.
No, for sure. Well, to me, a couple of the big plays were, look, you're going to lose contain sometimes. No team's ever going to keep a guy like, right? I mean, he's not going to run around like Lamar Jackson, but he's going to get out. He's good at that. And he's really good at making throws on the run. In fact, I think that was getting him moving to throw, I think was one of the adjustments at the first half. Where the Lions are going to kick themselves with a couple times they got hands on him. Melifon, we mentioned, I think Hutchinson had a chance at one point. There were a couple times where it was collapsing and they got hands and he shed tackles.
Good.
Right? I mean, he just made plays. You know, Dan Campbell was talking about after the game that that was one of the things that was so crushing for them and him, is that they have made the play for the most part. They knew. Dan Campbell talked about that, and I wrote about this. Dan Campbell talked about this last week. That, hey, at some point in the game, it's going to look like chaos, and it's look like it's all going against us, and it's going to look really, really bad. And then how are we going to find our way through that? Because they have. Not quite at Dallas, but for the most part, they've done that a lot this year. And he kept kind of waiting for him to make the play, right? And they just couldn't do it.
Right. Yeah, I think he stole Newt Rockney's speech, probably the halftime speech when the race against you boys, when the all that stuff. But it's true, yeah. But don't forget, the Lions were doing the same thing to the 49ers in the first half when Jameson Williams, the guy has his shirt and trying to drag him down, and he gets through and he scores. And Jahmyr Gibbs, when he seems dead to rights and jukes a guy and he cuts inside and scores, and the 49ers defense, they were frustrated in the first half because they were like, we had these guys dead to rights. We should have made the tackle. I mean, these guys are elite skill players. Brock Purdy, he's gotten this far because of that elusiveness. That's really helped him. He doesn't have an elite arm, and he's not a big guy, and he got some passes tipped and everything and knocked down, but he can move. And that's the thing that the Lions and a lot of teams do struggle with. It's not just the Lions. So give them a lot of credit for that. And, even though they were close, whatever, to me, the frustration of, when I watch football, the thing is the easy tackle, the tackle you should make. There was one on, I'm not going to single out Cam Sutton necessarily, but just on one, I think he threw to, I think it was Ayuk, and a little out, and he runs at him and just kind of grabs them, but totally almost whiffs. And then he goes for whatever, 10, 15 yards, whatever it is. That's the thing. Like, you have them. You should have them. It's still an open field tackle, but you should have them. But when it's more of the, I'm grab a shirt or whatever, but you're an elite guy who can move around and evade it, I'm not going to, that's not a bad play. I mean, those guys are going to slip, tackles here and there.
No, for sure. Look, it's the second youngest or third youngest team in the league. You can say experience doesn't matter to a degree, but it kind of does. And Dan Campbell talked again after the game about, as hard as it is, they learned a lot. They learned, you can make a mistake, but you can't then make three more over the next three series. And everybody did what happened on, how much he loves to talk about three phases. Well, they made mistakes in all three phases. A special teams mistake, defensively they made a couple of mistakes, right? And whiffing on sacks and so forth, maybe not being in the right gaps on the rush. And then offensively they made a bunch of them in the second half, right? I thought one of the big plays, well, first let me just go back to the late in the second quarter. I don't know what you thought. We didn't really talk much at halftime. When they didn't get into the end zone and make it 28-7, and after first and goal or whatever it was, they had a couple of shots. There was enough time they had a couple of shots. When they couldn't get in, I remember thinking to myself, those 4 points, because they had so much momentum, and you want to see them kind of stomp on them right there. And I know they got the field goal, but I remember thinking those 4 points might be big in the second half. And it just felt like one of those moments because you're on the road against a really good team.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get some, on that drive, if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of a sustained drive, and you can't just keep going for it. If you keep going for it and you don't get it and you get stuffed, that's a whole nother sort of dimension.
Oh, no. I didn't mean go for it. I was fine with them kicking the field goal. I'm just saying, as a team, you're talking about making the play. They had a chance. If they'd made that play and they gotten in the end zone, that might change things too. And I know it's just 4 points, but it's just, they had the fourth down, the second fourth down. They were down 3 or 4 at that point. I can't remember. San Francisco taking the lead, and they moved the ball right, and had a chance. I don't know if they would have held on to win or not, but just there was another chance they could have made the play. They just for whatever reason, do you believe couldn't make the play? Do you believe anything had to do with the stage, the moment? What was at stake? Do you buy into any of that pressure?
No, I think Campbell talked about it after they played plenty of big games, primetime games this season. I don't think it was that they weren't ready for this, for the pressure. I just think that they ran into a really good team. I predicted them to lose by a few points. And people just want to, look, I'm not a Lions fan. Okay. If you're watching this, you're a Lions fan. I'm totally dispassionate about this. I don't care who wins or loses. I really don't care. I'm not a fan. You have to understand that. And when I look at these teams, I look at them as objectively as I can. When I look at the 49ers and what they've done, how they're constructed, how they run their offense, being at home. I grew up in California. The 49ers were an elite team for a long time in the 90s. They won several Super Bowls. This is their third straight NFC. That all matters. Okay. Just flip it. If the 49ers were the Lions and this is the third straight time in the NFC title game, who do you think would you favor to win? And I know Free Press and a lot of people liked the story, the Cinderella thing and whatever, and all this and whatever. They're fairy tales for a reason, and you don't just do it just because everything feels good and it's a good story and whatever. That's a formidable opponent out there, and it's like, you can kick this field goal, you can go for it here, you can go, football games and the NFL is designed to come down to close games. They want parity, they want close games, all that stuff. And this is actually a damn good game. It was one-sided at first, and then the 49ers came back and we weren't sure what was going to happen, but it was well played. There weren't a lot of mistakes, So I think the Lions put up a worthy effort, but I think they're going to learn something from this.
No, they'll learn a ton. I would humbly disagree. There were a fair amount of mistakes on the Lions in the second, but they didn't seem like game-changing mistakes on their own.
Headed mistakes.
No, they weren't that. They're just a lapse in focus on the special teams. Now, whatever. There's small things you're not thinking, oh my God, that's going to cost them the game. They just add, except for maybe the fumble. And it's just bad luck to some degree, right? Sometimes you just fumble, but right? But the Lions got an interception in the first half, so right. And they turned that into 7 points. So in some ways that evens it out. All right, we're gonna talk later in the week, I'm sure, about next year, the division, all that kind of stuff. We'll get into all that, but just a parting thought about this year, what they accomplished, where the culture is, and do you believe? I guess, and again, we'll delve into this more. But do you believe in the front office and the coach? Because that too, I'm gonna, I think, look into that more for my second call, because that's what it comes down to. You either believe in Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, or you don't, and you just think this is kind of a one-off where everything went right. And then that's what we're going to find out.
Yeah, I think that I do believe in them. I don't think it's a one-off. I don't know. And Campbell said this himself too, like, you never know when you're going to get back here. And part of that is a good message to the team, because you just assume that, we're a good team, and they are, but it's hard to get back here. Things may not break your way all the time. The opponent, whatever it might be, an injury to a key player, you don't know. I mean, Alex Anzalone talked about it was a different team, but he was like, it took 5 years to get back here to this game because he went with the Saints. But I do believe in them. I do believe that there's sustainability in what they're doing, the way they've built the team, the kind of players they're getting. Dan Campbell is the key to a lot. Brad Holmes is a big key, but I think Dan Campbell is the huge key, though. To me, the bigger key is Dan Campbell. But also a very big key is what's going to happen with Ben Johnson. We don't know. We're going to find out how much he's responsible for a lot of this offensive wizardry and production. But I think they will. I think they're going to still, who knows if they're going to win another, NFC North title next year or whatever. But I think they're going to be, there's a lot of hope. I would expect them in the next couple of years to be, for sure contending for an NFC North title and having a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. So do you think that they're going to, you think they're going to come back here anytime soon, the NFC title game?
I mean, you got to get a break to get the NFC title game a little bit. San Francisco got one. Green Bay had their chances last week, right? You could say that the Lions got a break at the end of the Rams game. Yeah. Now, you can do with the non-call and the pass interference on Nakua, but you could also say, well, okay, any point, there are missed calls or whatever, or a fumble, bad break, whatever. And that's true. A play in the second quarter that is a tough break, it matters as much. advantage if you're just thinking about mathematics of it all. So, but the point is, you were talking about this earlier. Yeah, they're close, tight games, and you need a little bit of fortune. You got to put yourself in. You got to be good to put yourself in the position to catch a break.
Yeah.
To catch the right break. Absolutely. Unless you are Kansas City and you have Patrick Mahomes, right? And I mean, but that's different. That's like when Michael Jordan was running around the NBA, keeping all those other great teams from getting championships. Sometimes you see that. It's Tom Brady did the same thing in New England. So we'll see. That would have been fun to think about and talk about, and you would have gotten to go to Las Vegas. But wasn't quite meant to be. I'm with you. I think this is the beginning of something. I'm not saying they're going to be back next year, but I would think they'd be competitive for a while. They got a lot of talented young players. They got a really good offensive line. They've got part of a defensive line that's promising. They got places they're going to fill in, and we'll see. They need a field goal kicker. I think it'll ease up on some of the fourth down decisions, right? I mean, if they had Jason Hanson, he didn't go for it on 4th and 2. You know what I mean?
Jason Hanson right now, I don't know.
No, probably not. Yeah, probably right. But even Prater.
Matt Prater.
Yeah, I think he lets Prater kick that 48-yard field goal.
No.
I mean, that's what we're really talking about. So, all right. Well, Carlos has got to go right. I'm looking forward to his wisdom in the pages tomorrow. We'll be back together later in the week, and we'll take we'll take more of a look ahead.
Yeah.
And those sort of things. Then we'll get back to your hockey at some point.
Yeah, sounds good.
Because the Wings are playing pretty good hockey right now. So at least there's that. All right. It was just fun, great season. I'm acting like we're not going to see each other again. I guess we're just not going to be in stadiums together for a while.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad.
Okay.
I'm gonna go weep a little bit when we wrap this up. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us for Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. We will talk to you later this week.